I'm educational justice coach Lindsay Lyons, and here on the Time for Teachership podcast, we learn how to inspire educational innovation for racial and gender justice, design curricula grounded in student voice, and build capacity for shared leadership. I'm a former teacher leader turned instructional coach. I'm striving to live a life full of learning, running, baking, traveling, and parenting because we can be rockstar educators and be full human beings. If you're a principal, assistant superintendent, curriculum director, instructional coach, or teacher who enjoys nerding out about co-creating curriculum with students, I made this show for you. Here we go. Super excited about today's episode that was inspired by a podcast I was listening to. Super excited to get into it. So this is about documentary summative assessment. We've talked before about podcasts as summative assessment opportunities, but wanted to share a little bit about what it could look like to design for your own class or to coach a teacher that you work with to design a documentary as summative assessment for your class. Here we go. In this episode, I'm talking through an authentic, what I would call publishing opportunity for student documentaries on socio-political issues. I'm going to break down the steps that my students, when I was teaching high school in New York City, took in this project. And I'm going to share at the end of the episode, I will talk more about this, but I will share in the blog post to this episode a Google Drive folder of the resources that I actually used with students to teach this unit in my social studies / literacy class. Now, I want to tell you how I was inspired to create this episode. I listened to the podcast Pod Save the People. Love it. Highly recommend it. If you don't already listen, I'm sure I've talked about it before on the podcast. So I'm on a run listening to this podcast, and I hear DeRay McKesson comment on the state of kind of documentary filmmaking currently. He talked a little bit about some new examples and kind of the commercialization of it, and critically pointed out kind of need for two important skills in the documentary filmmaking space. And he talked about basically how there's very infrequently documentary filmmakers who have both of these skills. They either have one or the other. And I thought it was fascinating. And I thought, how cool would this be to think about this in the context of education? So let me tell you the two skills. He was talking about the need for filmmakers to be good storytellers. So you need to have the skill of quality storytelling, as well as what Goldie Mohammed would call criticality, right? So storytelling and criticality, both super important. And he says, we really should ask filmmakers, and this is kind of a quote, amalgamation of some of his quotes here. Do you have the range to tell the story? And do you have the range to interrogate the story? He says our best storytellers often don't know the content. They know how to craft the story. The critical interpretation of the content, rarely do they know that super well. And he says we'll have to figure out how to bridge the gap. I'm going to link in the blog post for this episode to the podcast that he shares this on, so you can listen to more of the conversation and get situated with that information and those ideas and context. So that's going to be at lindsaybethlyons.com/166. I'll link that in there. Now, here's what my brain did when I am thinking about this. Immediately, I was like, this is fascinating. I am imagining, because my brain goes to curriculum building, a course in which two of the maybe 5 priority skills that are course long were effective communication, under which I think storytelling fits, and criticality, right? To again, use those words of Dr. Golden Star Mohammed. Then I remembered that my students actually had created mini documentaries on social and political issues for a C-SPAN competition when I was in the classroom. And surely I had resources that I could share with other teachers interested in doing this kind of project in their classes. That jumped me into a search for all of these older resources. And I am excited to say that this podcast is the culminating results. Before I get into it a little bit more, I do want to talk about documentaries specifically as a format and why those are good for summative assessment. So 2 big things come up for me here. One is their multimedia format, and a project that it has a multimedia format to it
unlike maybe a traditional essay, really invites students to leverage artistic communication. So things like visual, auditory, narrative storytelling talents that they have, that if you're just doing essays or just doing more traditional assessments, they're going to stay hidden. They're going to maybe not even recognize that they have these talents. They're certainly not going to make a student feel like this is an important and valuable skill that can help them in an academic space. So in addition to supporting students' sense of academic accomplishment, I really think that this type of project or assignment, it generates a final product that's really useful in the current way we communicate with people, right? Communicating information to the wider public and like having an authentic audience, particularly around important social and political issues we're having students think on and ideate on and really heal harm that has been done in our communities, which is so much of what we're working on, what we talk about a lot on this podcast. That's really important, that how we get that out into the world, how we publish, quote unquote, students' ideas as they're grappling with this stuff, is accessible to the public, can get into the public eye, but also is accessible to the public. And something, the format is something that people really want to consume. I do think short form videos, and this isn't quite short form, I think this project was around 5 minutes or so video lengthwise, but shorter, on the shorter side compared to, a full feature length documentary. Shorter video content is really engaging for people, I think, in the larger community. And so it is something that people may actually consume outside of their teachers, their family, people who are invested in the student who created it. But now it can be appreciated and consumed and engaged with just by people who are interested in the topic or interested in the format and the way that it tells a story. So I think that's super exciting. And in this specific example I'm sharing from my class, there is an authentic audience built in. And I'll talk about that actually as I think an important step one of this process of planning for a project, or what I'll share soon around like actually being a unit around a documentary assessment. Finding that authentic audience and kind of publication opportunity is critical. Mine was C-SPAN. So there's actually, for the winners, a national publication of the student videos. So there's a chance for an authentic audience just within what I could create for students in my own locus of control. But there's also opportunities there for much larger audiences to engage with their content. So then the other piece of that, in addition to really thinking about the student experience and where their work goes, is that from a lens of curriculum development and a lens of student-centered pedagogy, specifically around project-based learning, this type of project really is main course learning, what the PBL folks refer to as like kind of that main course. So it's project as main course and not project as dessert, which would just be kind of a fluffy project comes at the end. It's not intimately tied to all the things we're learning throughout the entire unit and just becomes something almost separate from all the stuff they've just been working on. Here, it really has to be the main course. And so I'll describe to you in just a moment the unit effectively that this project was. It was a unit. It was a documentary unit and not just a standalone project after a bunch of learning. We did several mini units prior just to kind of build up their understanding of what possible issues they could select. But I saw this itself as a whole unit. So they're always working in this unit on the project. You'll see so much of it is really just project time, student time, and then they're learning and practicing specific skills and content as they need it in service of the project. So as they get to a particular stage of the project, okay, now I need this information. I'm going to, ask Miss Lindsay or whatever. And so PBL standards, that's gold star for a project to be the main course. Now let's get to literally, how do I plan this out? How do I support a teacher to plan this out? The first step, I think, is to find that authentic audience or publishing opportunity. So again, I built this around C-SPAN's annual student cam competition. They're still going. I just looked it up. They have their 2024 information up now. Typically, I think it's due at the start of the year. So I think this 2024 has passed, but 2025 should be coming out soon or soon-ish, probably fall of 2024. And then students, they had to choose the problem for the one we did in 2017. Students had to choose a problem that the new administration coming in should work to solve. So that was the prompt for that year. There's always some variation, but it's around the general same theme, like what should government do? And then in addition to that, they had to provide evidence of the issue, use video of politicians discussing the issue, and interview experts. So I think another component of this is really that you want to make sure the publishing opportunity, whatever the requirements are of that project, wherever you're submitting it, that should align with your courses or the teacher's course, if you're coaching a teacher, with their priority standards or skills. So the C-SPAN project really enabled me to assess students' research skills, their kind of argumentation or claim evidence reasoning skills and organization, also their technology use. So we were a one-to-one iPad school during this period. So it was really important that was like a school goal we needed to achieve. And also their creativity skills, which was really important for me. So having that kind of creative communication piece, all of these aligned with my course long rubric. So it felt like a nice fit. You don't want to pick something that's, too far out of the realm of what you're trying to do. Okay, step 2, once we've secured the publishing opportunity, and it doesn't have to be something you publish widely, I should say. It can be something that you just publish to the local community. That's totally fine. You could create that publishing community yourself. It just becomes a little bit easier easier in some ways, if you have that kind of authentic opportunity where like there was a cash prize for this. So that was another additional incentive. So, okay, after you're done with that, we're going to start the unit, really kick off by hooking the students in with student examples. So what is possible at the end of this? What can you create? What have students created before you and been rewarded financially and through kind of the publication nationally of their videos? And we really want to anchor this in students' strengths. So really asset-based lesson here. So my students ended up watching past videos that won the competition. And so we brainstormed a list of what are the qualities or characteristics of a video that could win. Then next, we brainstormed class responses to the question, what skills do you need on your team to win? And then students could come up and write their name next to at least one skill that they have from the lists we created. Then students had time in class to interview each other. And so really getting to the heart of like, what skills do you bring to the team? And then selecting team members. I think we aimed for groups of 3 here, but I mean, that's going to vary based on the project, based on the ages of students. And knowing really that their best bet to win or to have a great video, it's not all about winning, but to produce quality content is to have a diverse skill set. So you're not going to just pick your friends. If your friends have the same skills as you want people's skills that maybe you don't have. Right? And that was a really important conversation. Step 3 is really, let's get some project management in place and get started, which included for me a checklist, a timeline, and a rubric that I shared with them to guide their planning. All of those documents, by the way, are available in this free folder of the resources that I'm going to link to this blog post. That's going to be, again, lindsaybethlyons.com/blog/166 if you're listening along and want to check these out as we go. We also brainstormed a list of urgent issues that could serve as the claim for students' video. So really getting them started by like, they need a topic. That is step 1. They cannot go further. Once they've formed a team, they can't do anything else until they agree on a topic. So we brainstormed that list. We got people talking. We also, like some students couldn't decide. So we needed to support in that way. I would use things like Fist to 5 or some other sort of agreement or consensus protocol to help them there. Now, step 4, they've got their topic. They're rocking and rolling through the details of figuring out, putting together their video. So there's a ton of student work time here. I think it was about 2 to 3 weeks. And again, because this is the whole unit, offering just-in-time supports. So my quote unquote lessons or mini lessons were really workshops that were sometimes geared to the whole class, if that's what everyone needed, but often geared to like 1 or 2 groups. And I would just kind of move around and offer that workshop or invite representatives from the team to the workshop, giving them whatever they need at that time. This is usually skill-based, content agnostic workshops. So if they're doing different topics, totally okay, because the skill that they need to work on to create the video and pull all the things together and work as a team is going to be the same, regardless of what content specifically, like what topic they chose. And so I would offer resources, advice, guidance, coaching based on what stage of the project they're in and what challenges that came up. So some examples included, characteristics of effective teams research. At the time I was doing my dissertation and I was like, this is fascinating and relevant to my students. So let me try to distill this or share pieces of this because I'm seeing this dynamic play out in class. I want to, share what I'm learning with them. A storyboard template so they could actually, figure out how they want to pace their documentary. What sound am I hearing if I'm seeing this visual? And again, this is all this language and the kind of formatting of documentaries is, I feel like sometimes ableist in nature because we're using visuals and auditory. So I want to recognize that. Thinking about the other pieces of this, the downloading of politicians talking about an issue that was a requirement for C-SPAN. There's some tech stuff there that we had to coach on. And so I would have to walk students through or help students think through and offer tutorials on how to download videos from the internet, for example. Interviewing tips was a big one. If you're going to go interview, experts, what does that look like? What kinds of questions do we ask? How do we identify the experts? What's an exercise in criticality itself, right? Whose expertise do we value? And do we want to decenter some of the traditionally valued expertise in service of some more critical viewpoints and more, close to the pain, close to the problem kind of voices that really know what's going on in their lived experience of an issue? Also, academic citation support was one. I think that was a requirement of the project. We were still working on that. And that's also was aligned to my rubric and things I wanted to work on for the year. So that was a workshop as well. Okay. Once students had completed the project, this is step 5, we kind of had a part 1 publication, like a publishing party almost, where we're doing a lot of reflecting and celebrating, self-assessment, peer assessment, that kind of thing. So students played their videos in class. Their peers could submit feedback on the videos through a reflection form that we made in Google Forms. So everyone did that for all videos. Each team also completed a self-assessment for their group. So they would complete a Google form that asked them about kind of how they work together, what their contributions to the team were, and their kind of work habits, as well as their team members' work habits. And then each student group decided if they wanted to submit their videos to the C-SPAN competition. So I didn't make that a requirement, but it was an option and time was allocated in class for students who wanted to do that. So I think in closing, just, back to Duray's comment that inspired the episode, this project and its prompt, the format of the documentary, the prompt about asking young people to advise the incoming president of the most pressing issue to solve, I think they inherently, by just the structure of the project and prompt, ask students to practice both storytelling and criticality. And I think this post and a lot of the resources in the folder that I'll share with you are focused on the format, the storytelling element, the format of documentary, because it was so unfamiliar to students. But we did a lot of criticality skill building in our workshops, in our group conversations as they were developing their videos. So they were more of that just-in-time support, not necessarily something that was scripted as a whole class lesson. But I think you totally could do that. I'm just sharing my personal experience from this, but I think it shows up in the following ways. Just from, again, my experience, I think there are many places to do this, but one is how you select an issue. Do you want to select an underreported issue? One that you have, lived experience and like content evidence-based experience with, right? Or that you're connected to people who have a lived experience with that. So again, that kind of connects to what I was talking about with interview choices. You have to make choices about whose expertise matters to you. You are the documentary filmmaking team, right? Inviting students to think critically about that. Do they want to push back on, the credentials PhD and like, yeah, that's a certain type of expertise, but what about this type of expertise that is more lived experience based and often excluded from the conversation, right? And also, just critiquing and being comfortable and confident in critiquing existing policies, actions, and proposals. So you're submitting this, or students are submitting this to C-SPAN, right? So there's kind of a policy wonk like vibe of an audience, right? People who have been working on the policies, the actions, proposals that are going to watch this, or at least review this. That takes a certain level of confidence and kind of speaking truth to power that may require practice or support, especially some of my students who would tell me that their cultural values were to respect, elders or people in authority or that kind of thing. And so resisting some of those narratives or to critique someone's proposal as not a good idea felt kind of like a big jump that needed some support. So those are some places to consider leveraging and expanding students' endurance where it's critical interpretation of the contents that I think would be awesome. So go forth, documentary a summative assessment, build those units, help teachers build those units. I'd love to hear how it goes. And again, to help you plan, I'm going to share my folder of documentary project resources that I used completely free, linked in the show notes, the blog post, I should say, for this episode at lindsaybethlyons.com/blog/166. Until next time.
If you like this episode, I bet you'll be just as jazzed as I am about my coaching program for increasing student-led discussions in your school. Shane Safir and Jamila Dugan talk about a pedagogy of student voice in their book, Street Data. They say students should be talking for 75% of class time. Do students in your school talk for 75% of each class period? I would love for you to walk into any classroom in your community and see this in action. If you're smiling to yourself as you listen right now, grab 20 minutes on my calendar to brainstorm how I can help you make this big dream a reality. I'll help you build a comprehensive plan from full-day trainings and discussion protocols like Circle and Socratic Seminar to follow-up classroom visits where I can plan, witness, and debrief discussion-based lessons with your teachers. Sign up for a nerdy, no-strings-attached brainstorm call at lindsaybethlyons.com/contact. Until next time, leaders, think big, act brave, and be your best self.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. Explore more podcasts at teachbetter.com/podcasts, and we'll see you at the next episode.